Well, hi there. It is, what is it? It's June 10th, which means it's Journal 75 and T+69. Just about a month left here. Um, Today was Monday. It's a clinic day. So I go to the doctor and have my blood drawn. And when somebody asks me how I am, when I'm there, I'd say I'm waiting to find out. Tell you in a minute, because that's pretty much what it is. Although it was interesting because over the weekend, particularly um, yesterday, I can always tell when there's something going on in my body because walking becomes a problem. Even though Leslie and I walked 2 miles the other day through the neighborhood, but walking becomes a problem. You wind up getting shortness of breath, which is really annoying, and it's kind of frightening. Um, Especially if you're wearing a mask. And even with the two vents in the mask, it's still restricted breathing. Um, it's not normal by any stretch of the imagination. And I get cold, and when I put those combinations together, I've already learned that that's generally indicative of the fact that my hemoglobin is low. Which then it becomes a matter of which readings are going to be low enough to require some kind of intervention. In this case, my hemoglobin was low enough so that it warranted a blood transfusion. White blood cells were not low enough to warrant a Neupogen shot. Um, and platelet count was pretty much holding itself together, which is really exciting because it means there's something going on there that's supposed to be. So it took what would have been a relatively early day um, and turned it into a really rather long day. I had an 8:45 lab blood draw and then a 9:30 with the doctor, and that usually ends at 10 o'clock. And then it was a matter of getting the dressing out on my PIC line changed because it's critical that it remains antiseptic, that it's perfectly clean. And then, which all of that took a certain amount of time, but what it also does is it allows the lab a chance to pull the blood and get it over. And again, the City of Hope is a really, really large campus. It's much, much larger than it looks. Um, and then it takes a while to get that blood into you when it's going drip by drip by drip by drip. And it's really odd the things that you think about while you're in there, waiting before you pass out, because I generally wind up taking at least a short nap, um, because the blood takes an hour and a half or more to drain in there, and it takes an hour to get it over from the lab. So by the time you're done, you're talking about three and a half hours. In this case, we really didn't get. Well, we wound up going to the cafeteria about 2:30. So you figure that I saw the doctor at 9:30. Do the math. But it was interesting because I was thinking about a lot of things, and particularly I was thinking about the last couple of blog posts and managing expectations and realistically managing expectations, doing it effectively, and doing it so that it's a positive and not a negative. And I kept thinking about something that that I was exposed to, and I really um, recognize its importance in how you regulate the self. All right, how you handle yourself, or if nothing else, if it doesn't do a damn thing, if it doesn't do anything at all for your willingness or ability to take action, it's really critically important that you understand it, that you understand what's going on inside your head, what you're doing, what you're perceiving, what you're experiencing. And The I wish I could tell you what book it was. If I was home, I could just look up at the shelf above my head, and there are a couple of hundred books up there, and pull down the book. I think it was Porter's Fifth Discipline, but I'm not sure. Um, if somebody reminds me about it once I get home, 31 days from now, I'll be more than happy to look it up and let you know. But in there, there's a point at which he talks about three things that are critically important, and one of those things you've heard me mention innumerable times. Um, when I talk about a current reality, what your current reality is, what my current reality is, and I think that's significant if you stop to think about it for a while and refer to your current reality as a current reality. There are all kinds of implications with that are really important when you're struggling through anything that's difficult. And in this case, for me at least, it suggests that the reality that you face at this particular moment isn't the reality you're doomed to face for the rest of your life, or even for the next 10 minutes. Things can change. Things often change. Then you have to start thinking about, well, if your current reality is your starting point, right? Let me get my hand in the frame. Is the starting point, and your vision of the future is what's driving you. And it doesn't matter what that is. It doesn't matter whether that's recovery, uh, whether it's remission, whether it's being cancer free, whether it's being successful in business. It goes back to the same thing of identifying goals and objectives, figuring out what obstacles stand in the way, who owns the obstacles, and what do you have to do to remove them. All these discussions that we've been having lock together in a really fascinating manner. Um, and what the author did, and what he did, and what I did in the seminar work that I did, was I used to travel with large rubber bands, and I would pick somebody that was obviously leaning forward into the seminar, that was interested in what we were talking about, and I would give them um, those rubber bands, and I would say, go ahead, and if your current reality is here, if I can get my hand in the frame, working backwards, and your vision is over here, what occurs in the middle, if you have a rubber band between both of your hands, is your creative tension, what the author called creative tension, and that's some of the stress that you and I feel when we experience this phenomenon, and we experience the phenomenon more often than we think we do, and we don't often understand it or talk about it or bring it up. So this creative tension is critically important. Now, what I used to teach is what's going to happen if you go ahead and stretch that vision. All right, if you stretch that vision and you move that vision off into the future because you want a better life, you want to make more money, you want to take a trip, you want to do anything, the tension gets greater, and one of two things is going to happen. And this is what's critical to understand, and I think it was critical for me to understand. So consequently, I have a need to share it. Um, what's going to happen is either you are going to pull your current reality up, and it's going to change. And you're going to move towards success to reduce the amount of creative tension that you have, because we don't like tension. None of us do. Or what's going to happen is you'll start changing your vision. You will reduce your vision, the scope, the panorama of your vision, and we saw that in education. We saw that happen in education throughout the United States, where once we had very high standards and we had to comply with those standards, all of a sudden it became difficult for some reason, and what they did is start dumbing the educational system down, and the results have not necessarily been Great. So here you have your vision, you have your creative tension, and you have your current reality. And managing expectations tends to be a really critical component in getting all of that accomplished. Um, you certainly don't want to diminish your vision as long as it's realistic, as long as it's attainable, even if it doesn't seem realistic. But in truth, someone else accomplished it. You know, we go back to that discussion of the impossible again. It ain't impossible if somebody else did it. So there's no reason that you can't do it. All you need to do is create the resources necessary, to assemble the resources necessary, and then get it done. Um, but that's something else for you to think about in the future. So if I can get you, if I can tickle that vision, if I can tickle that current reality, if I can do something to reduce that creative tension, then managing those expectations become more realistic and more reasonable, and the results become better. The results become better if that's what you want, is better results. But again, be careful what you wish for, because all of these different roads to success will take you where you want to go, but you're liable to find out that maybe you don't want to be there when you get there. So, a lot to think about, a lot for us to talk about. Um, Hopefully, at some point, you'll join me in this discussion. Until then, stay well, take care. I'll see you tomorrow night when we will have just 30 days left here in Azusa. Thanks and good night.